Hi friends, it's so nice to see you again. My name is Droolbatz, and today I'm going to be discussing the 2016 horror movie Rebirth, which is currently available for streaming on Netflix if you're interested. I'm going to be discussing this movie based on three elements that I usually think about whenever I watch a movie, which is the premise, the production value, and artistic choices that usually go along with that, and then finally, how does this movie compare or contrast to other movies, TV shows, etc. in the genre. Anyway, I hope you enjoy. Kyle lives a pretty good, if average, life. He works at a bank where he does something with social media. Maybe it's not his dream job, but for the most part it seems pretty good. It pays the bills. He's got a wonderful house. He's got a beautiful wife who seems really nice and just loves him to bits, and he's got a really cute daughter. You know, he works out every day. He's got a routine. He's just kind of out there living the life. One day when he's having kind of an unsatisfying, rough day at work, someone shows up in the lobby for him. It's an old college friend named Zach. Now, Kyle and Zach have not stayed in touch, and Kyle's a little surprised to see Zach. Zach invites Kyle to this retreat on the weekend called Rebirth. It's supposed to help you kind of find your mojo again. Kyle is not interested, and Zach accuses him of being boring, and he's like, "You always said you weren't going to be boring. We wrote it in a manifesto. You became the thing you hate." You know, pretty rude if you haven't seen someone in like 10 years, that to be the first thing you say. And Kyle initially dismisses him, but later on at night, he gets kind of curious and watches the promotional video for Rebirth. The video kind of talks about how, you know, life in the United States kind of pushes everyone towards, you know, one speed, one track, and how different people are, you know, meant to live different paces of life, and how some people are like, "Oh, this is a great retreat. I feel so open and relaxed," and "Oh, I had such a sensual experience," things like that. And I think that last comment is kind of what Kyle got interested in. He decides he's gonna go on this Rebirth retreat. However, almost from the get-go, it's kind of a disaster. He shows up late and almost misses the bus to get there. The bus takes them to this retreat center, and when they go in, it kind of just looks like a weird house. Kyle is kind of put on the spot in their little group intro thing, and he's made to feel like he doesn't belong there when he answers a question wrong. So Kyle tries to leave, and he ends up wandering through this house, and people are like, "You can leave anytime you want, but, you know, we welcome you into this room." And every time he goes in, he's actually made to feel more and more unwelcome. Things kind of take a sharp turn when some guy starts yelling at Kyle about, "I have your bank passwords, here's a picture of your wife, blah blah blah, here's your social security." And Kyle's like, "How did you get this?" And Kyle had turned in his phone at the beginning of the retreat. This guy stole his information. Kyle's in a panic. Is this a scam? Are these people trying to hurt him? Is this a test he has to pass? He's really confused, and he's got to figure out what's going on, and fast. Two of the first things that I tend to think about when I'm thinking about a movie's artistic choices are the colors in the movie and the music. This movie had a really kind of traditional approach to music and sound effects. It made it kind of feel classical and classy. This movie also had a fairly average color scheme. Nowadays, a lot of movies tend to skew for what I would call kind of a gray, desaturated color palette. Not completely devoid of color per se, but the colors tend to be more muted. There weren't too many really bright, saturated colors, but they weren't too muted either. The bulk of this movie takes place during the daylight, so I think in that way, the color palette made sense for the story that it was telling, but I think it lost a little bit of opportunity to get really dramatic, but it also avoided being overly moody with the desaturated looks, so I think it struck a nice balance, but wasn't overall memorable in that way. This movie is about 100 minutes long. It has some really nice pacing. The movie gets right to the meat of the plot within the first 10 minutes easily, and just keeps going from there. There's no real dead space in the movie, and I think the script was really well written in that way that it just keeps things flowing. And it kind of keeps up this air of mystery and like what is going on. There really were no moments in this movie that just felt like disconnected, which I think speaks to really good editing. But again, there's nothing that really popped out that I can really speak to in that way as super memorable. It was just really solid. I think where this movie really shone was its cast. All the actors were great. There wasn't a single poor one in this whole movie. I especially was impressed with the guy who played Zach. I don't want to give away anything, but he displayed quite a range and he did it really well. Everyone else was good too, but he really stood out as kind of the crowning piece in my opinion. Overall, this movie felt very intentional and very direct. There wasn't a lot of superfluous artistic decisions, but everything in the movie, it just felt solid and comfortable. Now I'm going to be discussing how this movie stands apart from or blends into other films of the genre. And I'm going to try not to spoil too many things, but I'm definitely going to spoil a little bit. So if you want to see this movie for yourself, I recommend that you take this as your cue and leave. But it was lovely having you, and I hope to see you again in the future. Kyle is running around this retreat center that looks like it's just in an abandoned house, actually. Kind of in a crazed panic. He's trying to get out. He's trying to figure out if these people are scamming him or testing him. He finally decides he doesn't care. He just wants to get out, but everywhere he turns, people keep turning him around, and he wonders if all these people are against him or if he's just kind of going crazy. At some point, he hears his friend Zach screaming, and he approaches to find Zach looking drugged and like he's been in a room getting kind of beaten and tied up for a long time. Kyle fears that this is a cult. When he starts panicking and tries to get Zach out, he ends up pulling a knife on a guy, and Zach tells him, no, you know, don't pull a knife on this guy, you passed, this is the test. Kyle is so shaken and confused that he tries to leave and go back to his house. He's just done with these people, he just can't handle it, and he's not sure if it is a scam, if it's a scheme, if it's a test or what. He's still really unsure, but when he gets back to his house, things aren't all the way over. I'm not gonna say more than that. This movie really plays upon themes of kind of living in a crowd, what it's like to kind of feel like you're blending into the crowd. There's, you know, nothing you're doing that's spectacular versus feeling like everybody who's in a group is against you and you're kind of the one guy standing out by himself. Kind of how like the group can manipulate you, or you know, by making you feel wanted or rejected, things like that. It's a really interesting theme to explore, and I think one that'll hit home for pretty much every person that watches it, honestly, because who is not part of a group in some way, you know what I mean? The way that this movie, I think, stumbled a little bit in that regard is Kyle went through this whole experience at Rebirth in one day. Like, I think the retreat is on the weekend, so you go for Saturday, like you leave Saturday morning, you're there Saturday and Sunday morning, and you go home Sunday afternoon. He was literally just there on Saturday. So the bulk of this movie is taking place when he's at Rebirth one day, and it's these people trying to turn him around and get him all confused in a single day. I don't know that that's completely realistic to me, just because Kyle didn't seem to have a miserable life beforehand. He didn't seem to have a lot of, I guess, problems or things bothering him. He didn't like his job, and I think he was getting a little tired of the monotony of his life, but he had a good life, and he knew it, and, you know, he wasn't suffering to the degree that I think a lot of movies centered around these characters tend to, so it was a little less convincing for me that, again, a college friend he barely remembers, you know, he hasn't talked to Zach in 10 years, it's not like they were best friends or anything, comes out of the woodwork, invites him to this thing. It's really strange to me that someone that you barely know could get you so twisted up in one day if you don't have some sort of deep underlying issue, and the movie didn't really touch on that. There's a similar concept in a movie called The Game that's from the 90s. I'm really going to try not to spoil that because The Game is an incredible movie and I really do recommend you watch it if you haven't. The Game is a little different. It's about this man, I don't remember his name, but he's really rich, and his brother thinks the man, you know, he's living alone, he's got a big company, but I don't know, he's got no passions, he's bummed out because his dad died or something. And so his brother gives him this gift that's supposed to be like a personality test. After he takes this really in-depth quiz, though, it's like these people know everything about his life. He's concerned they're trying to ruin his reputation, take all his money, and he's not sure if it's a test or if it's a game or a joke or what. They just call it The Game. And I'm not going to say more, but surface level, hearing me explain that, doesn't it sound very similar to Rebirth, this kind of confusion? I really think that they have a similar premise in that way. Where they differ is the game is more about this one guy who feels he can't trust anybody, whereas Kyle is more, it's about the group dynamic. And in the game, it takes place over a period of time. It's at least a week. I don't know if they specify. It's like 2 or 3 weeks, I think. And you really get into the main character's head because it's not just one day. It's over a long period of time. And that to me makes more sense and made the movie more intense than just, oh, a bunch of people are bullying me for one day. So in that way, it really felt similar to the game, although I think the game kind of stepped things up a little bit. The game also, because it's an older movie and a lot of it's not filmed digitally, I don't think, and the game kind of followed the trend of like 80s and 90s movies where there was a lot of stark value contrast. So the darks were really dark, the whites were really white, and because a lot of the movie takes place at night and had a very expansive set, you really feel like you're lost in this world, whereas in Rebirth, it just takes place in this one building. I think that change was good in helping differentiate the movies. It really felt like Rebirth wasn't trying to rip off of the game, although, of course, you know, the premise is similar. But I think the time frame of the movies and kind of the difference in the characters' lives, what we see about them, really made them very different movies. And I'm not going to say that Rebirth ripped off of the game, I'm not going to say that, but they are quite similar, although the differences are notable. And I really recommend that you see the game. Whether you watch Rebirth or not, I really recommend you watch the game. I really think that the game was a more intense film. That's not to diss on Rebirth, though. I do think it was a very solid movie, and I think people who have not seen the game will probably have a more enthused reaction to it than I did. I still enjoyed it, even though I do think the game is more of an emotional ride, so to say. But they're both good movies. However, when I did watch Rebirth, I really thought of the game the whole time. So if you've seen the game first, I think you will also draw comparisons in your own mind. If I had to rate this movie, I would give it a 4 out of 5 stars. Rebirth is a really solid movie and very enjoyable. Personally, because I was comparing it to the game the whole time, I didn't find it as emotionally heightened as perhaps some people who have not seen the game might think of this movie. So if you see it, it's very possible you will rate it higher if you have not seen the game. But even having seen this movie that I think was very similar, I thought Rebirth was very solid and very enjoyable, so I would recommend it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you have any, please leave a comment if you have anything to say. I'd love to hear it all. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I hope that it was informative to you and interesting. Please like this video if you liked it, and please leave a comment or consider subscribing if you liked this review. I review horror movies here, and you know, we try to have a good time. Sometimes I run across movies that are free to watch, so not like something on Netflix or Hulu where you need a subscription. And if I find a free movie, I do include the link. So if you like free movies, maybe also subscribe. I don't know. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'll stop talking now, but I hope you have a great day or night or noon or what have you. Anyway, thank you so much. Bye.